What's up, guys? So my name's Daffy, and this is going to be the Daffy Horror Channel. So what we're going to talk about in here is quite a few things. We're going to talk about SCPs, cryptids, creepy things that happen in the night, really anything to do with horror. We're going to discuss on this channel. If you want, you can definitely go follow my Daffy Gaming and my dancing. So I'm going to put both of those right here. Besides that, today what we're going to talk about is the SCP Foundation. We're going to dive into it. I'm going to give you guys kind of the foreground of it, and then later on we are going to discuss certain SCPs within the SCP Foundation. So let's get into it. Let's not waste any time, and let's watch. SCP Foundation is a secret organization. SCP stands for Special Containment Procedures, or what is better known as Secure, Contain, Protect. The SCP Foundation is responsible for catching various things as far as paranormal, anomalies, SCPs, and anything that goes bump in the night that is not normal. So the SCP Foundation does this while also keeping anything about them secret. They don't want anyone to know. They don't want anyone to find out who they are. They don't want anybody to know what the organization does and what they do. They do this by various means, and we'll discuss that a little later into the video. But as of right now, just know that the SCP Foundation is something that no one wants you to know about. They don't want you to even know the name. They don't want you to even know that they are an entity within the world. The Foundation is a worldwide secret society consisting of scientific research institutions and also a paramilitary that is there to consistently make sure that these guys reach their goals. Even though the SCP Foundation is a super secret society, they are entrusted by governments all around the world to contain, protect, and obviously secure. It's something that the SCP Foundation does, and it's what they are amazing at. So various things go into as far as not being of this world. That could be SCP objects, that could be anomalies, phenomenons, paranormal, or what some people use this term called skips. Skips I'll get into in later videos down the road, but as of right now it is just a term to describe an SCP. Now nobody knows exactly when the SCP Foundation was actually created. There's multiple years going on of like 1954, 1871, 1891, 1901. A lot of the 1800s and 1900s is where people kind of fall into when it was created. There's some people saying that it dates all the way back into the Egyptian era or even before that. Now, that can be true. Personally, I believe that the SCP Foundation is even older than that. I believe that it falls even further back than that. And some prime examples of those SCPs would be SCP-1, SCP-411, SCP-073 Cain, or SCP-076 Abel. With those SCPs and how they are constructed and how they are made and what they live around, show me that it has to be older than what the years that we have it being. As far as the 18 and 1900s, Abel and Cain, we have no idea when they were made, when they were created. And the fact that they are stuck in a certain area of the Egyptians or back in the pharaohs, that just shows that we don't know when they actually were made or when SCPs were a thing. The Foundation had to have been out before that to know that, if that makes sense. So I believe that the SCP Foundation has been out way longer than we can even imagine. I don't think we could ever get an accurate year or timeline for when the actual SCP Foundation was created. So anytime an SCP is discovered or located, what they do is the SCP will send out agents of the military called the Mobile Task Force. The Mobile Task Force's job is to secure, contain, and protect the anomaly of the SCP without it getting worldwide mainstream or getting it on the news or getting it out where everybody knows about it. Now, if that happens to occur and that issue is to happen, what they do is they contain the people that have seen it and they give them amnesia pills that allow them to forget the time of what they have seen. It's how they keep it so secret and how the links they'll go to make sure no one knows about their existence. It's very smart. I'm not sure how into it gets, but I'll definitely be able to look into it more and be able to give you guys that information later down the road. Now, once the SCP is actually captured by the Mobile Task Force, what the SCP Foundation does at that point is they'll research, they'll run trials, they will get into D class, have D class interact with it. We'll definitely get into that. And they just make sure to see if it's a Euclid, if it's safe, or if it's a Keter. Once an SCP is captured and into the SCP Foundation's arms, they are researched and studied to see what is needed to keep them safe, what is needed to keep them full or keep their hunger up so they don't want to go out and do anything, or to see what they are needed to do to keep them in this protected chamber so they don't get out into the world and affect or hurt anyone outside the Foundation. Now, one part of the SCP Foundation that some people disagree and agree on, me personally, I agree with it, is what is called the D class. Now, D class are prisoners that have been sent to prison for life, for murder, for unspeakable acts that can't be said, and just anything that is deemed not allowed in the world. So what they are is D-class prisoners sent to the Foundation as experiments, as test dummies, just to interact with SCPs and see what an SCP would do to a human in the civilization world outside of the Foundation. So I agree with it. D-class is very important to do, but also I see where the disagreements are. We're giving a human life into the arms of something that we don't know anything about, and we're allowing to see what it would do to a human, whether that be death or unspeakable acts or sickness or illness, or maybe into a different dimension. The SCPs in the SCP Foundation have a broad spectrum of what they do and what they can do. So a D class is something that is up to you to agree or disagree upon, but is something that the SCP Foundation deems worthy, and they are very comfortable doing so to figure out what an SCP will and will not do to a human. The last thing we'll touch on with the SCP Foundation is called GOI, or Groups of Interest. The GOI consist of a couple different groups, so we'll get into them, but the main one I want to touch on is the Chaos Insurgency. I can't say it. I'm having a lot of trouble trying to pronounce that word. I've sat here for about 15-20 minutes trying to pronounce that word correctly. Even Google pronounced it with me, still can't pronounce it correctly. It's a tongue twister for me, but we're going to just call them Chaos for now because I can't pronounce the second part. So Chaos is ex-Foundation workers who used to be in the SCP Foundation facility and worked and studied and researched on everything. They're ex-Foundation workers whose big plan is to capture any SCP they can and use them for weapons. They want to weaponize these SCPs for war, or to tear down the Foundation, or to take over the world. There's multiple things they want to do with it. We are unsure of what they actually want to do with it, but that is the main focal point of it. The next group we're going to talk about is the GOC. I'm not going to try to pronounce their name. I'm very bad at it, so I'm going to put it right here for you guys. You guys can do with this whatever you will. The GOC's plan, basically, they specialize in destroying SCPs. They specialize in figuring out the SCP's weakness with a paramilitary, and they just do everything in their power to destroy the SCP. Now, obviously, there's some SCPs out there they can't destroy, in my personal opinion, but that is their specialty, and that is what they have against the SCP Foundation. The last group we'll talk about is the Serpent's Hand. From what I've read, and I've tried to get an understanding of who they are or what they want to do, it sounds weird, but from what I gathered, the Serpent's Hand just wants to suppress SCPs worldwide. I don't know if that means they also want to destroy SCPs, or if they want people to know about SCPs. Because some hands, they talk about letting people know about them. On the other hand, they don't want no one to know about them, which is basically what the Foundation does. So I'm not sure what their actual goal is to have, but that's from what I gathered. I'll definitely leave a link in the description to have you guys maybe help me out in the comments to understand the Serpent's Hand. I'm not new to SCPs, but I'm new to doing research about it. So it definitely would help me if you guys don't mind going down in the comments and helping me out. Thank you guys so much for watching. So that was the SCP Foundation. I just wanted to make this first video to kind of lay the groundwork of what this channel might be in the future. We're definitely going to talk a lot about SCPs and cryptids and any creatures, like I said in the beginning. Anything creepy and crawly that happens, we're going to talk about it. If you guys have any suggestions or anything you guys want me to talk about, please leave it down in the comments below. I'd love to read about anything you guys come up with. My next one might be Mothman. little teaser for you. And we'll do a little research on Mothman. I do live in the beautiful state of West Virginia, so I'm pretty familiar with Mothman. I do go and see the statue and everything. But besides that, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you did like the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Leave a comment down below of anything you guys think would help the channel out. And if there's any people with mic expertise, please down below leave a comment. I feel like my mic is not doing the greatest in the audio department. So if you guys don't mind, if there's any mic experts out there that can help me, I have a Fine K658, I believe. And I would love to have someone help me if you don't mind. Besides that, guys, I love you so much. Remember, stay beautiful, stay sexy, but most of all, baby, stay cocky. Take it easy.